Hey everyone, it's Michael Zipursky, and today I'm here with John Livesay. John, welcome.
Thanks, Michael.
So John, you've been selling for, I believe, almost 30 years or so. You've done a TEDx talk, you've been interviewed by Larry King, you've been working with companies like Coca-Cola, Gensler, where you've been speaking, and I think they've attributed, your advice to generating millions of dollars in revenue for them. You have a pretty storied career here. Like, just take us back. How did you get involved in this? What was kind of the starting point? How did John become a speaker and an expert in storytelling and pitching?
Well, I've had several different careers that have all helped me with my speaking career. I used to sell multi-million-dollar mainframe computers in Silicon Valley. So I
Hmm.
learned how to sell through telling stories, because a lot of people would say, oh, if it's going to break, IBM would say, then you'll get fired if you hire somebody else that was not IBM, which was what I was. So
Hmm.
I realized people make decisions emotionally about a fear and an uncertainty and doubt of getting fired if they buy something that's faster and even less expensive. That still wasn't enough. So
Yeah.
that's where I got some of my sales training. And then I worked in the advertising world, creating commercials for movies coming out on DVD at the time. And you
Mm.
really had to learn how to hone your storytelling skills to take a 2-hour movie and cut it down to a 30-second spot and convince the studios that this was the best use of getting people to want to rent the movie. And then I went and worked for Condé Nast, which is all kinds of brands like GQ and Wired and
Hmm.
W and you name it. And I would have to convince big companies like Lexus and Guess Jeans to run their ads in those brands. And that was all about taking the editor's vision of who would read this and showing how that would fit the advertiser's world. And while I was doing that, I would help the clients like a Lexus or a Jaguar by giving talks to their sales teams on how to sell to the luxury market, not take rejection personally. And
Mm.
so the ads in the magazine would drive people to the showrooms, and then my talk would help them learn how to not tell better stories and how to not take rejection personally. So that's sort of what launched my career. In the last 6 years, I've been speaking to, as you said, big companies who have sales teams that need to learn how to tell stories instead of pushing out information.
And what pushed you out of the corporate world, right, into consulting and speaking? What kind of drove you to say, yeah, I'm going to launch a business and kind of run my own show?
Well, what's interesting about that was in 2008, after being there for 15 years, when the economy was crashing, luxury advertising went down with it. I got laid off along with everybody else outside of New York and 30%
Mm.
of the New York's team, and had to reinvent myself and learn how to sell digital ads, not just print.
Mm.
And then they hired me back 2 years after that, and I got salesperson of the year. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm the same person, whether I'm being laid off or winning this award. And I thought, I've been on this self-esteem roller coaster, only feeling good if my numbers are up and bad if my numbers are down. I want to help
Mm.
other people get off that self-esteem roller coaster. And what's the best
Mm.
way to do that is to go out to as many companies as I can, because I've been in their shoes, and help them learn how to win no new business without burning out and without pushing.
So clearly, I mean, you have a sales background, right? You've accomplished a lot in the sales world. But one challenge I think that a lot of consultants have, or people kind of transitioning from corporate into consulting, is that in their previous kind of corporate work, the brand was the product, or they're promoting a
Right.
product. Now they themselves are the product. Did you
Yes.
feel and have any challenges with that? Because a lot of people feel uncomfortable around selling themselves and selling, promoting themselves as a product, because that's not something that they're used to. Was that something that you also face as a challenge, or do you kind of zoom right past that with your sales skills?
Well, I've always believed whether you're selling yourself as a consultant or as a speaker, or you're selling a company's products or services, you have
Hmm.
to do three things. You have to sell yourself first, then you sell the company, even if it's a one person's company,
Hmm.
what your culture is, your brand, and then you sell whatever it is you're selling. I'm a consultant, I'm a speaker, whatever it is. The
Hmm.
problem most people have, Michael, is they skip the first two and jump
Right.
right into here's what I do.
Yeah.
So even when I was at Condé Nast, I realized people were buying me first, my integrity. My
Hmm.
job is to make you at the ad agency look good to your client.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, oh, if I say the ad's going to appear on this page in this issue, that's where it's going to appear. I'm not going to do anything that's going to make you look bad to your boss or your client.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I was selling myself and my own personal passion for ideas. And then I sold the company. Here's what Condé Nast stands for. Here's what we do. Here's what makes us different than Hearst or Time. And then I would say, oh, and by the way, here's what my particular brand within the company does and why we think this is such a great fit for this launch.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always realized I had to sell myself the brand. And so as myself, I tell people all the time, you need to figure out who you are as a brand. What do you stand for? So part of the exercises I do with clients is, tell me what recent purchases you've made. And we find out whether they bought this Nike versus Reebok or whatever car, whatever it is, there's something about that brand that spoke to them that then resonates with who they are as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
So my 3 brand attributes are passion, integrity, and joy, based on what I believe is important. And then based on the brands that I support.
Mm-hmm.
And so that becomes my own moral compass.
Right.
If I'm not passionate about something, then I'm not going to do it.
Right.
If the people I'm working with don't have integrity, I don't want to work with them. And if it's not bringing me or somebody else joy, that's not a fit either. Mm-hmm. But if all 3 are in alignment, then this is the perfect client.
Yeah. So I love that kind of filtering mechanism that you can use to, to make decisions that all 3 boxes need to be checked. So about also the 3 ideas around selling yourself, selling the company, selling then what you're actually selling, right, in terms of the products. Mm-hmm. You had that when you went. So when you launched your business 5-6 years ago, how did you go about getting your first clients? Where did they come from? What did you do to start building that pipeline of business?
Well, the first thing I did was realize that I had, the riches are in the niches. Mm-hmm. And so the more I realized, here are the people I've already spoken to. When I was at Condé Nast, I was speaking to car companies and jewelry companies and fashion companies and travel industry, hotels. They all advertise with me. So I understand those industries and the problems they face. So let me see what that can be. And then, ironically, I got hired to be speaking in front of clients that had people, but they didn't want to be seen as salespeople. So that was Gensler, the architecture firm.
Right.
They happened to be the architecture firm that designed Condé Nast building, and Architecture Digest is one of Condé Nast brands. So there was a connection there. And then someone I met in college said, hey, I've seen your social media posts that you're a speaker now, and some of your clips, would you come speak to us?
Right.
So I think the big takeaway, Michael, is don't underestimate the power of your social media posts in your network of people who could then end up wanting to help you launch your business.
When you first launched, John, because you talked about, car companies and architecture firms and, so there's different those are different industries, but you also said the riches are in the niches, right? That common saying. Did you prioritize? Did you, for example, say, I'm going to start with just luxury car brands and I'm going to do that for X number of months, then I'll move on to something else? Or did you just say, no, these are like the 3 or 4 different industries that I've worked in and I have relationships in, I'm just going to kind of go at all of them all at once?
I decided, I wasn't going to just focus on trying to get to be a speaker at car companies. I was going to be figuring out, who do I help? What's the big problem I'm solving? And then figure out what industries are those. So the irony is the architecture firms had the same challenges that I had when I was selling advertising. So a Lexus agency would say, it's going to be media day. We looked at 20 magazines. We've narrowed it down to 5. We're going to pick 2. So all 5 of you can come in back to back to back to pitch.
Right.
And the architects, typically they fill out a proposal and they're in the final 3. And the airport says, if it's an airport renovation, all 3 firms get to come in for an hour and tell us why we should pick you. And the problem was those architects didn't have any sales training. They would just show their designs and hope that would win the business.
Yeah.
And I said, that's not enough anymore. You need to tell a story of why you became an architect. Sell yourself first through storytelling. Selling yourself doesn't mean pushy. And that was a big aha for them. And then they would say, oh, well, we have a case study. I said, let's call it a case story instead of a case study. And I would encourage all your consultants to make that little shift, because people love to hear stories. If you say study, it sounds like homework.
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
here's the before and after pictures of another airport we did, but where's the story? So I
Mm,
taught them how to tell a story that would show the challenges that were and how they solved them. So the goal is to get the client to see themselves in your story,
mm,
and you're the Sherpa or Yoda in Star Wars that helps them get through those challenges. So that was, oh, okay. So anybody who has to do that final 3 pitch, who else? Lawyers. I wrote
mhm,
an article on how to help lawyers win against final 2 law firms,
mhm.
executive search firms. So my niche is any industry that has to compete against competition in an in-person presentation.
So you're going after multiple industries, right? Different companies. How did you both then and now manage your pipeline? How do you manage, you sent Tim an email 7 days ago and
Right.
Jane 14 days ago. Like, how are you staying on top of following up with people and checking in and looking at ways to add value for them? What kind of tools or approach are you using to manage that process? Then and now? I'd be interested to kind of see, has there been a
Well,
change or has it been always the same?
yes. Well, one of the keys to my success in my sales career was before I became, someone working for myself as a speaker and a consultant is the follow-up.
Mm,
And I'm really big, and I think a big takeaway for your listeners would be, if you send something to somebody, don't always be a pitch.
right.
So if you see something in that they posted on social media, comment on it, share it,
Yeah.
retweet it. If you see they just had their stock earnings come up and things are good, compliment them on that.
Mm-hmm.
If you see something that's related to what their industry is doing, oh, I thought you'd find this interesting.
Yeah.
Here's what I thought about this article. What do you think?
Mm,
You start becoming a strategic advisor that's, oh, in case you haven't seen this yet, isn't this amazing? What they're doing over at Domino's with their new app and technology. I know that you're looking at new ways to explore your technology.
mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, use technology to improve customer services. Here's how Domino's is doing it with their app that tracks how much time it's going to be before your pizza arrives.
Yeah.
Or if someone says, oh, we're exploring ways to use artificial intelligence. Oh, I just talked to the CMO of Domino's and he told me that they're using it to anticipate. If you order the same pizza every night at Friday at 7:00, the same ingredients, the minute you get on the app or call, the AI starts the order to try and save a minute of delivery time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I
Oh,
think that kind of contextual, right, conversation and building the relationship is so valuable because you're right. A lot of people just think that every touch point needs to be a kind of a sales touch point, and that's uncomfortable for people. People
yes.
then don't want to respond to you. But how are you actually tracking that? Are you using a specific CRM tool, or what's your kind of approach to technology with that?
Well, my email list is on MailChimp, so it's nothing
Yeah.
fancy.
Yeah.
And my big way of tracking is who are my top 5 accounts
Yeah.
currently? What could I do to be nurturing that, get referrals, grow?
Yeah.
And who are my top 5 prospects? And I spend 80% of my time looking at that list
Yeah.
and trying to figure out something I can do of value to those 10 people.
Got it.
And
So
so
it's pen and paper,
obviously I
like,
put
oh,
particulars in my calendar.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I think the line's crossing there a little bit, a bit of a delay. I was just asking, so are you keeping track of that on kind of just pen and paper, like top 10 people top of mind, or are you using a tool for that?
I keep it in a Word doc, in a Google doc. I
Got it.
track it that way. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, what I love seeing is that people can have success with a lot of different approaches. Some people are very, very specific with their CRM. It's extremely detailed. They have every little note in there. And then what you're saying, it's very simple. It's like a Word doc or a Google doc. And
Yeah.
I think that the key thing there is you're focused on the people of highest priority and really keeping them
Yes.
at the forefront. John, I want to ask you, yeah, go ahead.
I had to use Salesforce when I was at Condé Nast. So I'm very aware of those in-depth CRMs.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically when a lot of other people have to be updated all at the same time. There's management involved but I'm able to keep a lot of that in my own personal Google Doc on that client.
Yeah, got it. So you're now 5, 6 years into building your business. At a glance of your website or LinkedIn profile, people would go, yeah, John's got a lot of good things happening here, lots of success. But take us kind of behind the curtain for a moment. What has been, a challenge, or I don't like to call them failures, but just a lesson learned that looking back on it in hindsight, you would go, yeah, that was a tough time, and here's what I learned from that
Mhm.
experience?
I would say the biggest transition from corporate to a consulting situation is you think, okay, if I make $100,000 as a consultant and I was making $100,000 as an employee, I'll be
Hmm.
good. You don't realize how much money is involved in creating your website, having someone edit your videos, hiring a publicist for your book, all of
Mm.
the expenses, paying for your own insurance, all of it. So it's like, oh my gosh, this business isn't breaking even yet. All the
Hmm.
money I'm getting for speaking and consulting is going right back into the business.
Yeah.
There's no profit yet to live on. So
Hmm.
you have to have a substantial cash flow situation managed, that savings or whatever it's going to be, to get you through those times. And then it's a little bit of a roller coaster in terms of frequency. But sometimes I give multiple talks in a month, and sometimes it's a little slower. And so
Mm.
the revenue is not a steady paycheck. So those aha moments of, will this work? And I remember interviewing another speaker who on paper it looked like, well, of course you're successful. And she told me, she struggled for a long time of not hearing for 6 months from her speaking agent, until
Hmm.
at the last minute she got a call that she could fill in for somebody. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I'm in that 6 month period. They call it the trough of despair in Silicon Valley
Right.
with the
Sure.
startups, where
Yeah.
you get depressed. You don't know how long you're down there before things pick up and what the tipping point is.
Yeah.
You're like, how many more things do I have to do before I have a steady flow of clients referring me and requesting me?
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's a lot of it's your mindset.
And so how did you get through that? Because now you are 5, 6 years into this. What kept you going? What helped propel you forward when you had those feelings creeping up? Because they are very
I
common.
think, yes, I think a lot of it is, what's my purpose? Is my
Mm.
purpose just to make money? Well, maybe I could go back to corporate America, even though I don't want to, if I just need to make money. But my purpose is to help people get off the self-esteem roller coaster. I remember what it feels like when people say, oh my God, that talk really inspired me, or now I'm telling stories and my success is, when you remind yourself of why you're doing it and keep checking back in with the clients that have hired you in the past,
Mm.
then you go, oh, this is more than just me trying to make myself famous or independently wealthy. I've got a bigger purpose that gets me up in the morning, and people feel that. In fact, when I got hired by Redfin, the tech real estate company, and the agent said, the irony is, Michael, I'm helping clients win those final three
Right.
things. And ironically, 9 times out of 10, in some cases, between you and two other speakers, you have to sell
Hmm.
yourself as a
Hmm.
speaker on a phone call or a Zoom call, why they should pick you. And so I did that with Redfin. And in that particular case, I pretended like I was selling my condo. And I called Redfin to see how they treated me. Then I called a competitor. And I did that before the interview.
Hmm.
So I was passionate about what their topic was. And they said, oh, wow, we're really curious to see what you did. And I said, well, if I did that much preparation for the interview, imagine how much I'm going to do if you pick me to be the
Hmm.
speaker.
Hmm.
And they went, okay, got it. So when my speaking agent called and said, congrats, they picked you, they liked your energy.
Mm.
And I think so many of us speakers, consultants forget that's really what people are buying, not your book or how many talks, whatever, their background. It's like, did I feel inspired talking
Yeah.
to you?
Yeah.
Yes. Then I think you probably inspire my team if we
Definitely.
hire you to come in.
Yeah, and just a note for everyone listening or watching. I mean, that's one of the reasons why having so many different touch points, whether you're publishing articles on your website or LinkedIn or some other channel, or doing videos or podcasts or speaking, the more that you put out, right, the more that people are going to feel like they know you and connect with you, and that makes the decision-making process around engaging or investing with you a lot easier for them. John, I want to ask you, you talk right now about kind of being one of the last two or three in a kind of a pitching
Mhm.
situation. But I think one of the other strategies that you talk about is about how to actually win clients back. How does
Yes.
a consultant, right, actually kind of go about restoring and rebuilding a relationship with a client and being able to win them back?
Well, I think the first thing you just said there, Michael, is it is about restoring and rebuilding the relationship,
Mm.
not going in with a bunch of information. Because if you've lost a client because you made a mistake, or the team before you made a mistake if you're in a big company, or someone feels like you didn't listen to them, or they're mad. There's all kinds of, or the competition came in with a lower price, whatever it is that caused you to lose that client. You need to be the one to reach out to them, because many times people say, you drop the ball, we're going to somebody else. And then they go to somebody else and they're not any happier, or they're even less happy, but they have to save face. They're not going to call you back and say, we made a mistake. You need to keep reaching out to them.
Yeah.
And again, trickling out little information. How do I repair and rebuild this? Still thinking about you. Hope that went well. Even if you didn't hire me as the speaker, I hope that event was successful for you. Not many people do that.
Yeah.
So the key is own the problem and then work on figuring out what you did wrong, that there's a system in place to make sure it won't happen again.
I think that kind of honesty, transparency, lowering the guard so that people actually feel like you're trying to understand, like the empathy side of it is so important. Yet many of us, are hiding behind the email or the social media. We don't want to, put out the appearance that we made a mistake or that we're unprofessional. But as you hit on, John, like we're humans, right? We need to connect with each other, and the best way to do that is to be very honest, like that. Radical candor. I don't know if maybe there's a book with that title. That kind of sounds familiar in my mind, but I think it's very important to do that, and many people don't. So I'm glad that you shared that. Let's talk about, so you have a book that you published called Better Selling Through Storytelling. And you've shared a little bit here about why storytelling is so much more powerful than the typical selling. I think maybe before kind of just, and maybe we could connect this to the book for a moment, you can maybe pull an insight out of the book. But for everyone listening to this right now, how can they take the idea of telling stories, and especially for those maybe who feel a bit uncomfortable around sales, they feel it's kind of too promotional, or they have to twist arms, and it's kind of like an icky feeling for them. How can they use storytelling to make that process of sales more effective, but also easier for them to succeed at?
Well, I've got two-part answer to that. The best way to use storytelling is you're solving two problems. One, you're seen as a commodity, and two, you're not memorable. So the better you tell a story of how you help somebody else, turn that case study into a case story, and someone sees themselves in the story, they want to go on that journey with you. So literally the closing question is not, do you want to hire me or buy from me? It's, does that sound like the kind of journey you'd like to go on with me? Much less pushy, a new tool in your toolbox. And the other thing is, whoever tells the best story is memorable. So it doesn't matter if you're first or last. And so you're solving so many problems of being seen as a commodity, not being memorable. Storytelling does all of that. And so there's some tips in the book on what makes a good story, how to become a storyteller. And once you start feeling comfortable with this as a new skill, you're going to be doing it all the time, because stories pull people in. And the old way of selling is just push out a bunch of information.
Yeah. So for everyone, again, just listening or watching right now, who goes, okay, that makes a lot of sense, but how do I tell a story? What's one example of a way to open? Like, do you recommend that people say, we were working with one company recently in this space, and this is how things, proceeded, or is there a better way, a more effective way to kind of weave story into that conversation?
A good story has four elements: exposition, the who, what, where, when, the problem, the solution, and then the secret to it is the resolution. What's life like after?
So what's the exposition? Let's start with number one.
So when you look at, so if you're going to talk about, in the case of Gensler, this is the story that helped them win the $1 billion renovation of the Pittsburgh airport when they had their chance to present. So they were saying, 2 years ago, JetBlue at JFK came to us and they needed us to renovate the airport. And one of the things, so you instantly know how long ago that was and where. So that's who and what, right? So it's very specific. It's JFK, it's JetBlue, how long? Okay, now we know the exposition. Okay, the problem was we had to rip up all the floors during this renovation in the middle of the night and get it done by 9 a.m. so that the stores could open and not lose any revenue. So one of the things we had to do was we had all our vendors on call, and sure enough, at 2 in the morning, a fuse blew. We had the vendor there to fix it at 2 in the morning, and at 8:59, the last tile went down and all the stores opened on time. So that's the solution. And then the resolution is, a year after the design, sales are up 15% in the retail stores because we've designed a place that people love spending time shopping. So without that resolution, you don't really get the, this is what, and so instead of saying, we use critical thinking to anticipate problems, I showed it in a story.
Right. Yeah, it's so much more powerful. I love that example.
There's a little bit of drama, 8:59, the last tile goes down, all that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen this ourselves in our business. When we weave story into conversations, it just resonates so much better. And of course, the story needs to be true. It's not something that you just make up. But when you bring story in, as you said, like, we're all from a young age, we all love stories. We remember stories a lot better. And so I love this idea of bringing into the sales process. So John, I want to make sure that people can learn more about you, about your work, and your book as well. So just tell us, where's the best website or place for people to go to learn more about all that?
Well, if anybody texts the word pitch, PITCH, to 66866, I'll send them a free sneak peek of my book. And then you can buy it on Amazon or wherever else you like to buy books. And it's also on my website, johnlivesay.com. But if you're not ready to buy the book and you want a sneak peek, text pitch to 66866.
All right, good stuff. So we'll have all that linked up in the show notes. John, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing a bit of your story, no pun intended, maybe just a little bit, but great to have you on here. Really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you for sharing all these tips with all of us here today.
My pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me on.